what I want to share with you tonight is this project that I keep noticing when I'm up in my storage library attic with all my stuff from the years past. And I noticed this one little bundle of shrink-wrapped objects. This, in fact, this chunk of mahogany and these templates. And it brings to mind one of the weirdest projects that I was ever requested to do. And that happened because I was counseling sort of with a guy who had a podcast a little over 10 years ago, 2013. And he was, he loved his dog Dexter. You know where this is going now. And doggone it, Dexter died. And sorry. And
I'm laughing. We shouldn't be laughing.
no, I got in touch with this guy. He had like this entrepreneurial website. He's the one who helped me come up with the name, Epic Woodworking. So fond place in my heart for him, but I haven't spoken to him in years. But anyway, he knew I was a woodworker, obviously, and he said, "Hey, Tom, could you make me a little urn to put the ashes for my dog? I'm going to have him cremated, and I want to keep him on the fireplace mantle, whatever." And I said, "Sure, I'll do that. How about we do that in trade for, I won't ask you any money, just in trade for a membership with your community there." And he said, "Sure, that sounds great." Well, I got started. I got this chunk of mahogany out. I thought, this will be cool. I'll make like a sculptural D, letter D. Not for dog, but for Dexter. That was the dog's name, Dexter. And it was about a week had passed, and then I heard from Mike again, and he said, you know, in the cremation process, he realized after the dog was cremated, they also offered in their services a box, a nice box. And it was nice enough, he said, so he didn't need that urn anyway. So I didn't tell him I had already started on it. I just thought, gosh, I thought that was a go. I mean, we kind of verbally agreed, but I'll give him benefit of the doubt. In his grief, he may have forgotten that we had agreed on that. But needless to say, I couldn't throw that away. I had my patterns. I just shrink wrapped them together and put them in the library for a time such as this. And I just want to show you what I had in mind, because I think it's a pretty cool method, and be ashamed to waste this piece of mahogany. But I'm going to show you not with this piece of mahogany. We'll actually work on a piece of white pine to kind of solve this. This actually will give me a chance to give it a dry run. And I'm not going to do the whole thing. This is sort of Shop Night Live in the old days where I am working something out, and I will do it right in front of you. So we'll see how this goes. But what's going to happen is I started with an initial template. Okay, I knew I wanted to make this box that was shaped like the letter D in a very contemporary manner, right? Very organic. And it would be beautiful and sculpted on the outside too with mahogany. It would have been incredible. I don't think he knows
one
what
of a
he's
kind.
missing.
I'm sure we can say that.
I know. It's doubly his loss, actually. Sorry to say, but this is the pattern I made. I just bandsawed out a shape of the D, and it is only in an 1/8 inch masonite. And when I did that, I then filed the edges to make it nice and smooth. This was going to be the template, the initial template, to make my two templates to fit create the hollow interior of the box. And we were going to go out from the hollow interior. So what I did was I took this and tacked it to a piece of 1/4 inch MDF. When this was tacked on top, I then plunge routed around with let me put this here, with a little collar and an 1/8 inch router bit. If I put this right in the middle. So this became just the initial template to create this inner and outside pattern. So after I had plunge routed, it came off this pattern about a 1/16 of an inch or whatever. But I did it with an 1/8 inch router bit. So the router bit just rode smoothly along the outside of this pattern all the way around, and it created an exact 1/8 inch gap in that shape. So that 1/8 inch gap is, if I set this here, these two patterns fit each other perfectly with an 1/8 inch gap. So once I had these, this could be the template to use to hollow out the interior of my D box. And I could do it by using another collar with a 1/16 inch offset, plunge route around here with the 1/16 inch offset, and go deep enough to begin creating this cavity. So I'd have a 1/16 smaller. Now I do the same on my top pattern, but this time I'm under the lid, and I route around this pattern, and again I get a 1/16 offset. So if everything is right, if I've got a true 1/16 offset, it should end up fitting nice and snug right in. Then I can cut the shape of the box. So this is actually, you know, the mahogany. So this was a huge chunk, a gorgeous chunk of 16-quarter mahogany that I had up in the attic. And this, a good weight to it, is really beautiful. You see it's very tight grain. And I bandsawed it open and then cleaned up that surface. But this is where we were going to have to put the cavity here, and then on here we would put the conforming and route around there, so I'm left with a lip that would fit into that category. Then I would deal with the outer shape after that. Now I know some of you may be thinking you could just make a bandsaw box, and that's true, but I was trying to make an actual one-piece sculptural piece. I didn't want to make a bandsaw box. I didn't want to glue anything on here. So I just wanted to keep it with, I didn't want any glue lines. I wanted it as true and full and natural wood. So there'd be very little movement and changes. Once you glue things on, it gets a little weird. So that was my choice of going it that way. I know you could do it as a bandsaw box as well. So let me just show you how I would approach this using these templates now on this piece of pine. I'm just going to show you kind of bits and pieces of this because we're not going to be able to do the whole thing, obviously. But here again, this is very similar to the mahogany, but you see that I've got that arrow. I want to make sure that I keep these oriented because this is how it was glued up. Now I did take two pieces of 1/4 and I glued them up together. It's not as nice as that mahogany where I had a 4-inch true block, but it was just for the mock-up anyway. So this is the same situation where I bandsawed, then I jointed and I faced that. So I have a nice flat joint there. So on this, I'm going to make that letter D. So this is going to be for the base. And I've got a nice square corner right here. So this is my router template. I'm going to get it nice and flush. Now the reason I'm going to reference off this edge is when I make this to fit the other piece, I want the grain to line up after it's done. So this is just a little extra step to make sure we get a good grain alignment. Let's see, I'll get it over here. Okay, that won't move during routing. So that's my D shape looking at this. So let's make sure we're lining these up. Right, so those are my arrows. So here's this is the D facing you, okay? So this needs to go over here on here. Oh, you know what I just realized? I was supposed to put this on first. Let me do that. Because I need this to set this. So let me just pull this off. No problemo. So again, I'm just going to lay it out using the corner here. I'm going to tack this on really just with 2 quick tacks here. So this will just take a second. Let me pull out those other pins. These pin nailers are really awesome for putting templates and working with jigs. They hold the templates really nicely on the work, and then they leave such a tiny hole that they're very easy to fill and make invisible. All right, so this is all nice and flush with the corner, so I know the grain will line up. But I got to get this set up to an 1/8 inch spacing. So I got this little bar, a little brass 1/8 inch feeler bar. Someone did send this to me. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I'm so bad remembering exactly who, but I know I did thank you back at the time. Thanks again. All right, so I'm just trying to get this pretty close. This will just ensure that the grain lines up like I said, okay? So once I have that where I want it, then I'm going to hit it. Okay, that's enough on there. Now we can go take this back off, flip it back over. So now you can see our templates are going to line up. So let's get this back on the corner. Same reference corner.
We're not sure that looks much like a D.
Oh, come on. Use your imagination.
Stretch, isn't it? Yeah.
What? Are you sure?
It's more like I've heard kidney. I'm thinking an apostrophe.
It is a kidney. It is. You got me there. No, I was just thinking an artsy D. I didn't want it to be necessarily very obvious it was for a Dexter. It was more, I mean, I really put my heart and soul into this. You can see now this is going to go back in. Everything's going to line perfectly because of the way we did things. So once we've got this, now we're ready to do the routing. So I'm going to do the top first, and I'm going to plunge route the lip on that. So let's get our nail router here. So let me show you the router setup. I've already got the 1/2 inch bit in there, okay? It's a spiral bit, it's an upcut, and I've got the collar. So this is a 1/2 inch diameter bit and a 5/8 diameter collar, outside diameter. So I'm ending up with a 1/16 offset on each side. Now you may find that it's slightly off center. I have found these to be quite accurate on most of the routers I've ever had. If they're off, they're just subtly off. And this is good to do a test because if it's a little tight, you may have to choose a different edge, or you can put a little tape on the bearing to change it appropriately to make the hole larger or smaller, okay? All right, so anyway, it's a good 1/16 offset. So that's going to be our template. Now, when I'm going to go around here, one of the problems is that I got the pressure out here, but I want it to be flat on the outside. And if I just go down, it's going to be tipsy. So I want to put a spacer over here. So what I'm going to put is a piece of material the same thickness here. So if I just bring my router back up, I've got a piece right here And I'm just going to put this on. Now, I cut it this funky shape because I thought it was going to work for the other side, but I ended up having to make two. I'm going to put this on here. Now, I have it in tight because I need it to give me support. I'm going to go around once, and that'll give me a 1/2 inch trough. Then I'm going to go out further because I want the thickness of the walls of my box to be, I'm going to say like 5/8. If I go too thin, I don't know. I just didn't, I wanted to have more dimensional security, and, you know, we don't want a box with ashes to break, right? So I got that on there. Now, if we bring it up and put it back on, check this out. I feel very stable. I'm very comfortable now. I'll be able to run around, no problemo, right against there, okay? So let's just do a little of this, and I won't do the whole thing because I already did one that I'll switch to here in a minute. But I do want you to see this a little bit. Now, because I want to end up with a 5/8, I'm going to make two passes, like I said. The second one, I'll go out a little wider so that I'm out from the 1/2 inch. I'm going to get out to about 3/4 of a flat, and that should be enough. All right, let's get the safety gear on. Our glasses, our ear protection, and our dust protection. And I'll turn on the vacuum.
You're ready. Armor on.
Here we go. Oh. I'm sorry, one thing I didn't do was set the depth. I'm just going to plunge, hit the surface. Okay, so right there I'm hitting, I'm doing nothing. So let's move, this is our stop. Okay, right there it's 0. So it's equal to where the bit is right now. I want to make the lip a little over 1/8. So I'll just come in here with this, and then I'll bring it up about 32nd. I just felt like, so I'll bring it up. I felt like 3/16 was too much. And there we go. That's our depth. All right, let's get started. All right. So once I've got that routed, I would make sure that I had, 5/8 flat out from that lip. Okay, 5/8 is how thick I want the wall to be. So when I have at least that, I would go actually out to like 3/4 if possible. Then I'm going to bandsaw. I'll mark it out there. I'm not going to cut this one, but I'll just explain it. So I'm going to just make a rough line, greater, around 3/4 of an inch at least, away from that lip, okay? So I might have to take a little more off here, a little more here with the router, and just come right around. Just give myself a gracious margin there. And then I could bandsaw that out. And what I would have is the flat rough sized like this one. Okay, so basically this is what we got. I just bandsawed out around. So see, we've created, I popped the pattern off and I've got a nice lip like that. Okay, there's my lid with the lip integral to the top. Is that nice or what? All right, so now we can get our base, and for the base, this requires, I realized that this is so close. I needed it close for that one, but I need it a little further away so I can get into this tight corner. These edges will hit in here, so I'm just going to pop and change this out real quick.
David was noticing that you pulled out the Festool 1400. Do you prefer that router now?
Not necessarily. I had the DeWalt already set up for something else, and I didn't want to change it. But yeah, I mean, I like them both. I do like I don't like this handle. I prefer the two hands. I just find that more comfortable in most cases. But the D-shaped handle or the single handle, you can one-hand it, I think the D-shape gives you a little more feeling of control. That's like some routers are made for like single hand. If you're just doing a little round over or something, like a light routing cut, they're really nice. Okay, there we go. So this time I'm going to put it out a little further away from the cutter so I can get into that tiny little. And there we go. So let's get it back in here. And it's so nice to have dogs like that. And it's nice and solidly held. Let's get our gear on, and I'll just do a little of this. Okay, so what I would do is then reset and plunge deeper, because right now I had it set at the same depth as the lid insert. So my lid insert, that's the same depth. So now I'm going to set it a little deeper, plunge a little deeper, and go around again and make sure I clean this off. I got some fuzz here. So what I would do is normally I would just come along here, knock this off, just the fuzz as much as I can, because that could come up and then be against the wall and actually cause you not to be able to get a good cut. So I just clean that off quick, break it off. It doesn't have to be perfect, or just break it, push it down, and then go again. I'd go around twice just to make sure that's nice and clean. Then you can set the depth. I'd go another 1/4 inch deep or so, go around, and I'm leaving this little island of wood in the middle. That's for the outrigger to sit on and balance you while you're going around, so you'll stay in there. Now, once you get at a certain depth, that's really, I'm pretty much done with this router setup. I would then chisel this out, the center island, just knock it out. And then you're going to have to clean the rest of this recess in some way. I would just prefer, rather than routing that whole thing and just going deeper, I would get on the drill press with a Forstner bit and go around. That's a nice, calm, easy way to remove a lot of material. I get a lot out and then route around the edge using a router bit, like something like this, where you have a top collar. You've seen these little guys. You got a top collar in there. Let me see. You got one here. Or you could almost chisel. Once you got it deep enough to accept the lid, then you could just chisel and shape the inside. But it's a little tricky. So I would try to get the recess using the bearing. This would come off. So this comes off, and then you're going to be able to use the this type of bit. And I would put a larger plate on my router so that it would span over, and because you're going to take out this island, right? Now, what I would also do then is, let me think. I would probably clean out the whole cavity as much as I could while it was still the block, okay? Just makes it easier. However, I'm not, for this initial demo, I'm not going to do it that way. That's my thought. It's just easier to handle and work with something and get that interior nicely shaped. So once you're done, you're left with this recess, and you chip that out. Let me show you what I've got here. So this is just like it. I went a little deeper, probably only about, not quite a 1/4 inch deeper, but you can see I'm deeper than the other lid part. And then I chiseled out this little island piece so I could try fitting my lid. Now it was a little snug. So I went around and I sanded a little bit, and I realized I put it on the tighter tolerance on my router bit. I knew I was right at a 16th or even slightly under, but I decided I would rather sand to fit than be loose. So I can come in here and press it on. Presses on pretty nice. It's still a little bit tight. So, but it's not too bad to clean this up so that it will fit. You can just use a card scraper, and you can come in here. If you see it's like tight right in this area, you're going to go with the grain always, right? So I'm just hitting this. If you file it, you can mar this up. The inside, same thing. You can come in here. Just give yourself a little breathing room. It's going to be close, so you don't have to do a ton. You're always pulling this so you're going with the grain. And then you're going to get some sandpaper, You might need some 100 grit if it's really tight, but I've got the 150 here. But I want to get this to fit really nicely, not too tight, right? But it should be a classy kind of, almost like a shaker oval box when you fit the lid. If you've ever felt how those go on, most times they just kind of sit right on. I assume, I've never cremated a dog. We've had some great dogs over the years. Right now we're dogless. But
Yeah.
I never cremated one, but I imagine the ashes are in a bag. Is that true?
I don't know. I live with you, and we've never cremated a dog. So
Like
I'm
a
not
plastic
sure.
bag? They don't just like,
I do think they offer the urn at these places.
yeah, but it's got to be in a bag so that the you don't just pour the ashes right into the wooden. Okay, so once I would sand it until I had it fitting nicely, and that goes in pretty nice right now.
Lupe says, given the fact that the box is made out of a solid piece of wood, would there be issues with the expansion and contraction of the wood and maybe having issues with the fit? For instance, this is an issue with one issue that one has with wood-turned boxes from time to time.
Yeah, I was wondering that too, Lupe. That's why I wanted to make it out of the same material. So you can see if this was the solid block, you can see all that grain. It was resawn. So this is sawn off in the exact position it was. So the lid is going to expand and contract. There could be no better match. You've got the same wood, and we're, what are we, about 1.25 inches thick here. Now I made that lid extra thick because I wanted to sculpt this, and even you could do a more fancy D. Now this is not the shape. Now that I made this oversized, because remember I wanted to make this 5/8 of an inch thick, I would just set my square now or some gauge to my 5/8 of an inch. I'm going to use a pen, I think. Does anyone else have problems with the pen you pick up never seems to write? That's my...
I bet this is spurring some creative thought for others.
Oh yeah, that's why I wanted to show this. This is kind of like, I was trying to think if I've ever made a box like this. You know what, I'm just going to go freehand method, my old finger gauge, because you know what, it doesn't really matter if this is exactly the same, because the interior is what is already set. We've already got it.
That router, you did have the dust collection on, right?
I didn't have it connected to the router.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I'm sorry. I should have made that more clear. I didn't have the that type of dust collection on the router. It has to have a separate kind of plate, and I did not have that on there. So I just had the dust collector hose going, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I could be like a doctor, you know, suction. It's very high skilled.
Working on the kidney.
Yeah. All right, so you would just kind of get your perimeter line how you want it here. And this is where I would bandsaw it. Now I'd have the cavity fully evacuated, right? So I would bandsaw this. You know what, in the interest of time, I'm not going to do all this, but once I bandsaw it, then I would smooth the outer shell a little bit, not much, and then I would put the lid on that shaped base, okay, now that it fits, and I would trace that final bandsawed shape onto the lid. We don't have time for that. And once, so let me just explain that one more time. We're going to cut it exactly that wall perimeter, smooth it, sand it, put this on, and then trace that smooth wall perimeter in here. That's why I needed more than 5/8 in here. So I've got good 3/4 all around. So I would draw around there, and then I would bandsaw heavy to that line, and I could even put that in and route that edge to the shape, but then I'm going to sand it all when the lid is on. So once that's all sanded together and it's all shaped up, I could bring it over to my flat belt sander and go right around. It's really, that's the technical part is done, right? You've got your lid fit, you've got the outside of the box. Then you can get kind of artistic, like, this isn't the right D, it's not as nice, right? As the shape we were going to have. But you can see you could make like a carved element in here. This is going to even look less like a D, right? But where these shapes are folded over, or you could make it almost like a volute. You could do something crazy, like these edges would be really sculptural and rounded. You know, play around with however you want to make it. But that's basically the approach. So can you imagine how this would look in mahogany? Like, you would do that same treatment, this lid would go on, and you'd have this gorgeous mahogany box, and it would be so much lighter, but that lid would be so sculptural, you know? So, well, it didn't happen for that, but it did give us a good opportunity to dream of a nice way to make our own little...
So might need an episode 2, it's being suggested.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we could pick it up next week. I don't care.
You can pillow the box too, Evan's recommending.
Yeah, I would like to do it. I mean, maybe we should just do it next week.
Maybe.
Oh, that'll be the tentative plan, all right? We don't care about it's for you guys anyway. Okay. So, all right.
Awesome.
That's
Cute.
it on the questions.
That's it.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Remember, if you like this content, please like, share, and subscribe. And check out all our content on epicwoodworking.com. We really appreciate you. Thanks for being here with us. I'm Tom McLaughlin, and that's the camera lady. We look forward to seeing you next time right back here on Shop Night Live. Good night, everybody.
Guys, good to be together again. We missed you. Take care.